Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Monday evening of the Political Consciousness of West Coast Steeler Fan, known on Facebook and other social media as to an imperfect union. It seems like a lot of my guests are on CP time tonight. I'm going to hit a couple of them up and see what's happening here. Let's see. Uh, let's see. Let's start here with okay, let's see. Let's start there. Um, and yeah, just I'm sorry. Maybe it's maybe we're having trouble uh, with the links tonight. But I'm going to resend a few. See if that helps. Um, Sometimes when you ask tough questions, I do understand that it's a hard answer. But I would rather okay. Um, I sent a few out. Okay. Okay. Uh, okay. So I know that those two are out there. So we'll see. I'm talking about everyone else, and here I am, ill prepared to myself. Let me plug in so that I can be heard a little better. Um, I am kind of worried because it always seems that there's a crisis here at home. No, let me put this in the. There's always a crisis in the world that circumvents the crisis that we have here at home. We have our own wars here. at home. We have a war on poverty. We have a war on crime. That have as many casualties, if not more. When you think of the long term results. Let's talk about the universal fear or lack of empathy on a worldwide basis, not just here in America. Even under extreme conditions, we see pets, animals, given space to get out of the country before minorities and people of color. I want you to think about that for a minute. A dog, a cat, having more of a sense of space than people of color. I see Mr. Scott is here. Good evening, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, James. I was thinking I was going to see the Timberwolves this evening, but I didn't hear from my brother, so I waited for him, and I don't know what happened. Timberwolves are on fire. Timberwolves are hot.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have you guys come on our Thursday show. We like I said, I know. I know you Minnesota Viking fans like to hide in the bushes and whatnot, and but you know
If you let James
we
King tell it, if you let James King tell it, yeah.
well, wait a minute. Well, hold on now, Mr. Scott. I've given you a Thursday invitation ever since I've known you to come and talk sports with us, and you have not once crossed over that line, except
I never, I never got a link.
except.
Never got
Uh,
a link. Never
uh,
got one link. Never got a link for a Thursday show.
okay,
Never.
now
Not one.
I will make sure now that I'm making a public announcement that every Thursday from now on we will make sure that Mr. Scott gets a link to our show, The Sports Crib,
What
where
time?
we
What time is the show?
the show is from 8 to 10 your time. And
Okay.
we break it down into segments. We break it down into the NBA, where you can talk about your Timberwolves. We break it down into the NFL, where you can talk about your Vikings. And we have a college section where we talk about HBCUs. So there are numerous topics
Wow.
that you can.
Wow, that'd be great. My brother's a graduate HBCU baseball player at Alabama State,
Hey,
former coach, baseball coach. So
send
yeah,
us
we welcome the opportunity, James.
send us a link, and we can talk sports where we don't have to be so antagonistic.
And that's fine. They can antagonize me.
um, but I'm actually looking forward to your show this Saturday, where you are actually talking to the young lady that is running for sheriff. Um, I had her name up here. Harris, I believe her name is. It's on Facebook. I know it's on Facebook, on Don's page. Um, but once again, I saw your interview this Saturday with the former sheriff, Mr. Rick Stanek. And before I get into that, it seems to be a great disparity to me between the sides of the river. Because when you show what's happening over in your sister city, which has a young black mayor whose family has been in politics for numerous years, from what I gather. I mean, his mother is also a part of not only his support group, but she's also a vital
Ramsey
politician.
County Commissioner. She's Ramsey County Commissioner. Yeah.
Right. So why are things so different over there than they are in Minneapolis?
Well, I don't know if they're so different, but
Mayor Fry and the mayor of St. Paul. The
right.
police chief, the police chief in St. Paul, the police chief in Minneapolis. Should I keep going on?
Well, to let you tell it, sure. I mean, you have a
No, 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 no,
version.
no, 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 no. These are facts.
You
These are facts. Like, if you want to compare Mayor Fry's record, whom you reelected,
I didn't. Well, see, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I got to stop
okay,
this rant for
okay,
just a second.
who,
Just
whom the voters of Minneapolis reelected. How's
thank
that?
you. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay, okay. So you t- so why is there such a disparity in the reasoning of the voters in one city as compared to the other?
Well, if you let James King tell it, first of all, the show on Saturday, that's the Don Allen show. I'm just a guest, as anybody else can be a guest, and I was just a guest on the show. And if you let James King tell it, I signed the no knock warrant. According, if you let James King tell it, I'm the campaign manager for Jacob Fry. But I have to tell you that all of those things are not facts, and those things are not reality. But I have said why this. I was on a show last week. I think I invited you to the show actually, where this lady has a program, Rose McGee. It's called Sweet Potato Comfort Pie. And
Yes.
what she does is she uses the pies as a way of bringing people together, but also showing cultural things of the Black community and sharing it with the community. She shares the pies, she shares the programming. I've been on a few of her programs, and she had me, she had my sister, Dr. Scott, and she
Right.
also had Mayor Melvin Carter III, along with his
Right.
mother, Tony Carter, who is the president of the Ramsey County County Board. And she's been there for several years. She's going to be retiring. And his father, Melvin Carter II, is a longtime policeman in St. Paul. He's retired now.
That particular program is the one where I was introduced to the mayor of St. Paul and
Okay.
his mother. It
Okay.
was the one where you and your sister were on talking about your book, and I found out that your sister was a Harvard graduate.
Yeah. And Columbia.
and
PhD,
Columbia. You know,
doctorate.
so you know, so if you let James King say it, tell it. I was influenced by the people on the show that you introduced me to. Now, those people presented a whole different program and opportunity to their black community, which is now. Are you separated by a river or a freeway? How are the cities separated?
Yeah, it's really separated really just by the Mississippi River. And there it used to be we could get on a street called Lake Street, and Lake Street would go one way, you'd get to Lake Calhoun in Minneapolis, but if you kept going east, it would take you right into the city of St. Paul, right across you go right across the bridge of the Mississippi River on Lake Street. Once you cross the bridge, you're in St. Paul. I mean, that's how close the cities are. They're really, I almost consider them one in the same, or like neighborhoods, like like neighborhoods. I used to love going to St. Paul to party and hang out, and
Uh,
but they're very close, and you'll find a lot of people from St. Paul and Minneapolis in the black community. Now that's what I'm referring to. I don't know much about the other communities, but in the black community, you'll find a girl from St. Paul married a guy from Minneapolis, and they moved to Minneapolis. And you'll see vice versa. Somebody from St. Paul married a guy from Minneapolis, guy from married, and then they move, they become St. Paul. And so what happens is when I go to St. Paul, and when I went to Mankato State College, I met almost the whole neighborhood of St. Paul people, like the black community. Matter of fact, our dorm manager was a guy named William Corky Finney, who's the long-term chief of St. Paul Police. Okay, he was chief of St. Paul Police for many years, and we're longtime friends. Had connections because we went to school together. But he's longtime St. Paul. I'm longtime South Minneapolis. So the cities, but I think St. Paul has been able to retain something that a lot of our cities, including Minneapolis, haven't been able to do, and that's keep our community, keep a community. They still have a lot of the St. Paul people that have been a part of this. When you look at my dad's books, another book that I did called the John Glanton Photo Collection. John Glanton was my wife's uncle, and he took pictures of the Twin Cities black communities in the 40s and early 50s. And when you look at the community, all the things used to go on in St. Paul. You couldn't do anything in Minneapolis. So everybody went to party and after hours, all the stuff you could do in St. Paul. Because St. Paul historically had been a gangster hideout. The John Dillingers, I mean, the famous gangsters, there's some caves downtown St. Paul that they could keep things refrigerated during Prohibition in these caves. The caves are still there downtown St. Paul. So there's a lot of history between the two cities. And I think, James, I'm glad you point that out, that coming from the outside, you can sense a difference between Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I think that's what it is. And there's Dr. Casey.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi. I went to your website and I saw a picture, Dr. Casey, and I was that Photoshop picture. Was that real? I mean, was that?
With my
oh
tattoos?
man, maybe I better go on her website. I just sent you the address. Maybe I should go on the website myself. Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
all the photos are real. Um, you're probably talking about the one with my tattoos on it.
Yes.
I have a lot. I actually have more than what I had then.
Yes. I enjoyed the
So
photos.
do you have some
And, as a matter of
sleeves?
fact, I see why James King is talking about coming your way, but I think I'll probably beat him because I'm probably going to be there this month. A place called, have you ever heard of something, Lilburn?
Yes, I've heard of it. I do not know exactly where it is, but it's not that far. It's in the vicinity somewhere.
It's in the Atlanta area, right? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
no, Mr. Scott. I've already had two heart attacks, and I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to, be, she's already warned. She's already warned me about the pole,
Oh boy.
and
Woo!
I mean, uh, like I
Y'all are
said,
crazy.
it, it'll take me back to the things that I used to say to a grandmama. So I'm trying to stay out of jail, and I'm trying to stay upright. So,
Listen,
like I said,
my dad loved younger girls or women, and I used to always tell him like, "Dad, I mean, you can like them, but you can't like them. Like, it's cool. Like, I get it, but yeah, we not
uh,
gonna let them
when
set
when
you up. They crazy."
when I moved here and I was 63 years old, then my last girlfriend was 23 years older than me. So I mean, hey, like I said, I do
I
not.
mean, if you can find somebody,
Look. I'm trying. Look, temptation comes in all shapes and sizes. I
Don't go
understand.
to the website then.
All right.
Don't.
what?
That's
No,
why.
see, it don't make it
That's
seem
why.
like that.
That that's why I gave it to you. Like I said, Mr. Scott.
Listen,
That's why I
if
gave it
you
to
go
you
to
rather
my
than him.
Instagram right now, I just uploaded a video where I show all of my tattoos. Like I didn't get tattoos to hide them. I did get tattoos so that people could see what life means to me. Because
Okay.
all of my
Now,
tattoos have meaning. The only one that doesn't was like something that was like a friend pack, and I'm the only one that still got the tattoo. But my tattoo was the best out of all of us.
You
so
know,
do you have sleeves? Do you have a back? A back art?
I
I
have
mean,
arms. I saw
majority of
one arm.
I have all of this arm is pretty much done now, and then I have majority of my back done all the way to the middle, and some of the sides. But my very first tattoo was is a cross that's on my back. So when I told you about my mom trying to kill me, after my mom tried to kill me, I went and I lived with a cousin. During that time, I had a dream, and in the dream, it was a person. It was like the person looked like it was like the Machiavelli cover, but it was like a woman. But I didn't want to put a face on the woman when I got the actual tattoo, or when I had it was a gentleman. I was in high school. I had a guy that was a very good artist. He drew it out for me, that what I saw in my dream. And that's what I got on my back. That's also the lady that's here on my book cover. So I
Oh,
transformed her
is she
into
down there too? Is she down there in Atlanta too?
see, I sent Mr. Scott there with very pure intentions.
That's just a
It it
question.
it was about a book. That that's I don't know
He did.
how.
Make a purchase.
You know, hey, I don't know how we got from book to tattoos and back. I mean, look, okay. Anyway, so
I have a lot of tattoos. If you go to my Instagram right now, if you go to Speaking Freedom Instagram, I have a video up there. It's actually being advertised and promoted right now of me just kind of showing my tattoos, but I'm listening to some Nina Simone, so I got a little feel to it.
Before we get off the tattoo thing, though, just one statement I would like to make. My youngest son, when he first got his job, he saved up his money, and the first thing he did, he went to go get a tattoo. And so it saw a big tattoo on his arm and shoulder, and I kind of just glanced at it, and I was like, "Well, why would you want to? Why would you want to do that? What made you want to do?" He said, well, "That's what I wanted. I wanted a tattoo." And so then I really looked at the tattoo, and what it was a cross, and it had my dad at the top, had me and his mom and his brother. I mean, I was just like, "Wow." I
Yeah,
mean, that's
it normally well, first off, you sound like you got a little choked up there. It sounds like it was very special and you waved it off
yeah,
at first, but when you got an understanding, it made you
yeah.
feel some way. And that's good because tattoos should be like that. They should give you a feeling like, well, some people just get random tattoos. Every tattoo I have means something. Every single one, from the one on my back, literally, it was a female version of his Machiavelli cover. And coincidentally, I just survived some near death incident on his birthday in 2006. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
for me, it has been very prophetic in some instances and symbolic of a lot of things that mean something to me or how my life has made me feel at one point.
I have a lot of passion and a lot of empathy as far as people and having tattoos. But early in in my life, as I explained to everyone, I was a criminal. And that was how you were identified. The first thing
Right.
when you, with the first thing when you came into the jail
They say,
cell,
listen, I'm not a criminal.
no, 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 no.
Right.
I'm saying my
Yeah.
reasons for never having a tattoo. I tried to be
As
under as much,
inconspicuous as possible.
right.
Under the radar.
You're right. So I mean, it wasn't that there were many. Hey, times and events, that I would love to have marked, when I was younger, but until I retired from that particular life, to me it was just
Affected.
something that you did. And
It
then
was it's more of a hazard. It is. I mean,
right,
because
right. And
anytime people get even like when they be on internet doing crimes or any type of trouble, the first thing they're going to do is say, okay, well, we know this person got these, markings on a, you know what I'm saying? So it's
right, right,
just, but for me, and I understand that for me, I just never erred on the way of crime. I saw so many relatives go to jail and so much, just around me that I was kind of like, okay, so that's what y'all did. Let me
well,
go this way.
right, and I have a son, thank God, that feels the same way. As if you mention the word jail, he goes and runs and hides under the bed, and he's 40 some years
I
old
don't
now.
blame you.
You know,
Yeah.
but and I respect that, but like I said, and then the other thing is, by the time that I got into a professional life, I was thinking about, well, what are they going to look like when I get older? So but hey, uh like I said, I respect everybody's decision on what they put on their body as well as what they put in their body. So you know
Well, James and Dr. Casey kind of related to that. It's something that has Don mentioned on the show Saturday that we've just had some legislation about hair,
oh
so that people are not discriminated
but
because I mean I just to me it's a time wasting thing. It's ridiculous, but the politicians were on TV how happy and what an accomplishment this was to get this hair. They call it the Crown Act.
yes, yes.
They call it the Crown Act.
But
And what it is people that wear their hair in a certain way. Maybe it's not as depending on their job. Maybe it's not as corporate. Maybe it's not as the image they want to portray, or for any number of reasons. There's been this
the
back and
half
forth.
braids, the different,
The more
the side,
ethnic,
the sideshow Bob look. I understand.
the more ethnic
Right,
styles.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
So
uh, uh, it's
with all the
uh,
things we have to do
how do
here,
you how do you
legislative wise, to make a big fanfare of that,
but
I don't know. It didn't really strike me.
but
For the
Mr.
people
Scott,
that they're trying to appease, that needed to be big for them because in areas like where you are, the way racism works in those areas, it is a in areas where we have agitated people, that is something that the same way they smooth us over with holidays, that's something that's smooth over the people that's
Mm.
mad about them doing the holiday. It's like a tit
But
for tat, but on the other end.
but Mr. Scott,
Yeah.
now on that same program, and I know uh, our Black Voices does not endorse any candidate. I understand that, but I also, as I said, you guys, I think on Saturdays sometimes now, I'm very interested in how you treat the uh, what's her name, Shawana Harris. Is that her
Yes,
name?
yes, yes. The young lady that's running for Hennepin County Sheriff.
Right. I'm very interested to see if you treat her with the soft kid gloves as you did Mr. Stanek, who was the former sheriff of Hennepin County and is now running for governor. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This is now, let me make sure I have this gentleman correct
Yeah.
because this is the same Stanek that sent officers and equipment to the Standing Rock protest in South Dakota while you had killings and shootings right there in the city of Minneapolis. Am I correct?
I believe that happened. I didn't read that, but I mean, if I mean,
I mean, your daily news I'm talking about here. I mean,
it's
things didn't.
probably true. I mean, I have no reason to dispute it. So
Okay. This is the same Stanek that had a civil case brought against him because of racial slurs that he hurled, but the case was thrown out of court
and
because
and
of.
I asked him about that. And if you listen to the program, I asked him specifically about that. Yeah.
And like I said, now you also, I mean, during this time, like I said, that this gentleman has also uh, shown that he has not had what we would call a good record when it comes to relations between the indigenous people as well as the black community. Am I correct?
That is correct. And if you listen to the program, I asked him about that use of racial slurs, that people heard it. I also asked him about him being accused or being, I don't know if you could say charged formally, but several incidents of police brutality against citizens of the city. And he very politically was able to dance around those questions and was able to just say, well, I have never been charged. I've never been, and he didn't really, and then this thing about the slurs where he used the N word. I mean, that's on record. And and so he didn't say he didn't say I didn't do it. He didn't say that he very politically danced around it. And, I mean, so you could, for me, that shows me what his answers were, a non-answer to those questions.
So, how do we have trust in Republican conservatives when the people that they are bringing forth as candidates not only show a lack of empathy toward the black community, but also, as I said, seem to be a total opposite of the candidates that are offered just across the river. How is there such a difference in the support of the black community?
Well, again, I don't know that people are supporting. I don't know who supports. I mean, I think that's an individual thing who you support. And as far as the candidates, I guess I'll just bring it down to what the show has. And what it does is it gives a chance for these people running to tell who they are, to tell what they're about, to answer questions about, for me, any candidate, I'm really only interested in what they're going to do for me. I'm only interested in what they're going to do to make my life better, my community better, where I live better, my community, my neighborhood better. And so that's just the kind of things we ask until, and we won't know obviously until the election. And I'm looking forward to meeting this young lady that's running for sheriff. She's a black lady. I do not know much about her. I haven't checked into her political affiliation. I haven't done my research yet. But I mean, I think that's a real breath of fresh air. And I think in law enforcement in general, there should be more women in a variety of roles. And I know in one of our Black History programs, we brought in Commander Charlie Adams from Minneapolis Police. And we asked him point blank. Actually, Ron Edwards was actually at this meeting. He came in with Commander Adams. And he said point blank, he said, the reason we don't have more women, he said, I've gone to HR to try to do that. And they said, because of the testing, because everybody has to run 5 miles in so many minutes. And he said, basically, all the officers he supervised probably couldn't do it, let alone someone coming in. So we also have a sheriff now. I don't know if you've heard of this. Oh, what is his name? Hutchinson. About a month, 2 months ago, he goes to a police conference in a place called, I think it's Alexandria, almost at the South Dakota border. On the way back, he gets into a horrific car accident. He's drunk, okay? He tears up the police car. He's got a gun with him. He tells the officers that come, I wasn't driving. Okay, so the officer looks around, doesn't see anybody else. He says he's not driving. He gets back in town, says he's not going to resign. He says that I've taken care of this issue. I'm in treatment. It's all drunk driving charges don't go away like that. They take your license. They should have removed that man from office right then and there, and his second in command should be in charge. Now, there are civil service rules, and so you probably would have to pay him. But how in the world, with him having a drunk driving conviction, and this is the work that they do, and what if he has somebody that works with him, that works for him? How's he going to hand out um, discipline to people? I mean, his credibility to me is completely shot. But he's not, and they're saying, well, we can't remove him because the union. We can't remove him because the people put him.
Criminal charges, criminal.
We have to recall. We have to have a recall election, and so he just said he's not running again in November.
Criminal charges usually circumvent all those things. If you, yeah, I mean, okay, uh, I'm talking, I'm talking from someone that's on the wrong side of the law and the wrong color. So I I'm going to try to put that behind me what you said there because I mean usually for me it was a matter of paying off the sheriff or and then I would
I
get
mean,
into
but if he didn't get charged for nothing and he didn't get no real punishment, then
yeah, well like I said
technically that's what he did. He got off easy.
yeah, if there's
Yeah.
no charges then that kind of circumvents the whole thing. But you know uh, another thing that I noticed today and Um, I plead guilty to watching, in MSNBC, CNN, all of those media outlets. But one thing that I noticed is that while liberal and liberal politics are still concentrating on the war in Ukraine, conservatives have went back to politics as far as the country is concerned and where they can attack the system and especially economics. One thing that is being pointed out is this dependence on fossil fuels and uh, whether or not we can get away from foreign oil. Uh, Mr. Scott, Donald Trump told us that we had plenty of gas and oil reserves, and we didn't have to buy from foreign people. That was the reason for him attacking OPEC. Um, Now we're going to Venezuela, whose politics against their own people are as bad as what Putin is doing to the Ukrainians and asking them for oil. Now, I was kind of critical when Biden came out with, this new job projections about charging stations across the United States, opening up 75,000 new jobs. And one of the things that I asked was, well, how many of these are going to benefit the black community? How many charging stations do you see on your side of the river, Mr. Scott?
Well,
And and you know, I'm wondering how this employment and jobs development is going to once again be taken away from minorities and people of color because we are going to have an influx of refugees in this country also. Are we once again going to be put at the bottom of the list? Your thoughts?
yeah, I think we are definitely going to be put at the bottom of the list because, for one, these kids are graduating from school, as we've talked about, James, and can't read. I mean, we're living in a technology society that's moving. It's pretty much left me behind. I mean, this computer stuff drives me crazy. Just password stuff. Can't get in. Can't do that. And so, if we're not prepared, of course we are. And they're going to just tell us anything. This is what they've been doing. And this is what they do anyway. They just tell us anything. I mean, this Ukraine. These Russians are acting just like the Europeans always have acted. They want something, they go take it. That's what they do. They come over here, they want something. Forget the native people already. They want something, they take it. That's what they're doing. So until we really get, and now another thing that's happened here, so much things are happening in the Twin Cities. I mean, and your observations, James, are just astute, right on. But now, and one of my sons is a teacher. They're going on strike tomorrow. Minneapolis Public Schools, teachers are going on strike tomorrow. And they're going on strike because the governor, Walz, gets on the news and say, we got $9 billion surplus. We don't know what to do with this billions of dollars. Maybe we'll give it back to the people. Okay. So these teachers are like, look, the conditions we're working in, the lack of technology for these students have had to work at home. They don't have no computers. We can't give them computers. So they're going on strike. So what's that going to cause? These kids need to be in school. Okay, now they're not going to be in school. They've already been disrupted with this COVID and distance learning. And now it's a full-on strike. And they're still negotiating in St. Paul. They may be going on strike any day now, too. Now you talk about a real mess right here in River City. You talk about a real mess. So I haven't talked to my son today, but they're on strike as of tomorrow. So that's just one more thing to exacerbate the situations here in Twin Cities.
Dr. Casey, what's your thoughts? You know, is Atlanta going to stay chocolate?
Atlanta is a very unique place. It will be chocolate forever. Now, right outside of Atlanta, it's a whole nother damn story because it's still Confederate flags everywhere. Um, but
Mm.
um, we definitely have charging stations everywhere. It's Atlanta, so we are normally kind of ahead of the times. But when it comes to being a chocolate city, I think we've got a little bit more chocolate recently, because a lot of people are gravitating here, um, especially because of the perks of filming in Georgia and all of those type of things. Um, this is like the real Wakanda, like no lie.
Yeah, I have a gentleman that a Vietnam veteran he does a lot of shows on Adult Swim, and they do a lot of things out of Atlanta as well. Uh,
Well, Turner Broadcasting System is right downtown, but Tyler Perry just opened up his second studio. But whoever he sold his old studio to, and then not far from me, I actually used to go out to a studio and watch them build it. So I started seeing them create the first buildings, and now it's a whole full on. I think they do. Darn, I can't think. It's one of, I don't know if it's the Avengers or something like that. One of those
okay.
movies are done out here by my house. And then it's like two or three other studios. So it is real big in the film industry right now. It's like the Black Hollywood if there was one. But Atlanta is a very unique place. I've lived plenty of places. I lived in Phoenix for a while. I visited California a lot. I have lived in Florida, of course, in Kansas, and when I was in Korea. And Atlanta is a very unique place because you don't feel ashamed to be successful. Like other places, it feels like you gotta like live like a criminal, even if you're not a criminal, because people are looking at you like, well, what you got going on over there? They just not used to seeing black success. But in Atlanta, it's like nothing to see a movie star or a music artist or anything. So it's like second nature. And when I lived in Florida, I had like 4,000 square feet. And we used to get some of the craziest looks. And now I live in Atlanta. I have like 6,000 square feet. Nobody even cares. This is small to a lot of people, So it's a comfort for me.
Well, Atlanta seems like, for me, hearing about Atlanta, I've been down there several times over the years. And every time I talk to someone, they say, well, from Atlanta. But when I talk to them, they're from Smyrna, or they're from Fayetteville, or they're from all
I
these
mean,
little
you
different
heard
communities,
the
but they say
song that
it's Atlanta, but it's all these little different
you heard the
places.
song from Amaretta the Great. She just had a song recently that has gone viral, calling out places not being Atlanta. But um Atlanta is, when people say Atlanta, they're normally talking about the metro area. Anything right inside 285, but right outside of 285 also, because 285 is the circle that, if as long as you in 285, you ain't lost. But once you get outside of 285, you might venture off somewhere. But it is a place where a lot of people come to live. My daughter was born here, and my son was born in Phoenix. So for me, Atlanta has been home for a long time, but I remember being a little girl and sitting on one of my friends' front porches and was like, man, when I get older, I want to move to Atlanta and I want to do all of these things. And I did everything that I said I wanted to do. And then James, earlier you said that will America become a place full of refugees? Like that's what it's always been. I don't know what you mean. Like the Europeans came, everybody is from somewhere else. This country is established from foreigners. It is not. a place where many people were actually born here or their ancestors are from here. There are brown people that fit that description, but we've been all brainwashed to think that we from Africa. So don't nobody think they from here. Everybody think they from somewhere else.
you
Literally.
no, I mean it's sad that you are actually speaking the truth. Everyone assumes that if you have to be African American. You have to be um, at one time, Mr. Scott. We had to all be Negroes if you were of a certain hue. It didn't matter, if you were dark skinned, you were a Negro. I mean, we had Cuban Negroes, we had Haitian Negroes, but we were all
But
lumped under
that's
the
the trick
same
though.
umbrella.
That's the thing. That's how they got us by making everybody that had any type of pigment to be Negro or African American or black, and it is a really thin line because like for me in particular, recently I've been doing a lot of research into my family history. And I can get all the way down to my grandmother's great grandmother, but after that, all I know is that our lineage comes from Virginia, and that's where a lot of Native Americans were, but I cannot find her parents. So it is, like, but people would think in the 1700s you had to come from being on a slave ship, and that wasn't always the case. Sometimes you didn't come that way. Sometimes you came from other means.
I was at a
The
meeting.
mindset of when I look back upon my history, and a lot of the men just maybe happened to be scoundrels, but we were never Negroes. That, yeah, the term Negro, it just turns my stomach. It's like I I don't I can't find out what to do with my hands. I want to put them around somebody's neck. Whoever pawned that. But anyway, uh,
Well, but see, James, that there's a bigger question to that: is who are we? Really, where I was at these meetings with Hennepin County, where they would always try to get you in these meetings where you tell about yourself, and I mean, it was all just. I mean, I had a terrible time staying awake during these things. But this one lady, oh, she was so into it. This white lady was so into telling about herself, and then she got up and bragged that she's a 10th generation. Now, the lady's last name was Bach, okay? She says she's a 10th generation relative of the great composer Johann Sebastian Bach. And I'm thinking, dang, I don't even know who my grandfather's father was. You know?
Really?
Yeah.
You
I
could
don't
you could
even
probably
know.
find that out. I could help you.
Yeah, I want to do some genealogy on it. I've been doing some on my own, but I know that there's things
It's a
that I
lot.
don't
It
know how
is
true they
very
are.
overwhelming. If you have, what I would suggest that you do is look for the archives for your local paper, and in there you can find a lot of things. But then the other thing is, I went to Ancestry. I don't want to say they name too much because ain't nobody paying us to be shouting them out.
Yeah.
So I went there and started doing a little bit of digging, and it took me several tries and several like trying to figure out and piece it together, but I really got kind of far and it was kind of refreshing. But again, I got to a dead end eventually. But you can find it, especially between going through your local paper archive. If your family was from there, then you'll be able to find like anything where it mentions your relatives, and then also marriage licenses and all of that type of stuff.
Well, I do subscribe to this thing called newspapers.com.
Yep,
And the
that's what I use.
Historical Society hooked me up with that as I'm an author from the Historical Society. And so I have done some because I'm doing some other book work. I'm doing a book if I ever get it done on a neighbor friend of mine I went to school with. And the reason I'm doing it is he was a kind of a nerdy guy, and it really wasn't didn't play sports with us, didn't have a lot of friends that I recall, but he would walk by my house going to school, and he'd just knock on the door to walk to school. And because my mom could never get me up, he would be downstairs eating my breakfast. My mom was like, "Boy, just take your toast and go. You're gonna be late." And so he would do that every now and then. But he was just a real nice neighbor guy. So I'm in college, and I've always read the newspapers, mainly for sports sections. But I happened to read in there that this gentleman was blown up. He had a bomb, and he was going to this company called Honeywell. Now, this is the story in the paper. And he was going to blow up Honeywell. And he was supposed to, and there was a mention of Panthers, there was a mention of subversive groups at that time. And
But
at that time,
they'll try to throw that in there just to, what I'm saying,
yeah.
spice their story up.
But now at that time though, so as I go through to research these papers about him, there were a lot of bombings in things of federal buildings and different things around the country. Okay. And I'm thinking, how in the world could he be involved? James of this, that was his name, by the way, James. And I happened to run into his sister, and she said, "Yeah, that happened." And that me and my mom and dad had to go to the hospital, and we could only identify him by his dental records. There
Oh
was
my
nothing
God.
left from this bomb. And so that whole how he got involved in that, how or really what that was. My brother says, "Don't touch it." He said, "Just leave that alone." But it's because I knew James so well.
Mhm.
It's just intriguing to me to go back and look at what really happened with that. Where did he go after high school? Where did he? How did this happen within 2 years after we left high school? He has a
Man, it's
bomb.
easy to get turned around and mixed up with the wrong people. You could just have the wrong conversation, and
But that
somebody
seems to
make
be
a
more than hooked
suggestion.
up. That seems to be more than you know what I mean. It seems
See,
to be
but that's
more.
that's how it starts. What? Okay,
What
Dang.
year
so
was this, Mr. Scott?
This would have been about 1970, 69 or 70.
Oh, come on, Mr. Scott. 1970. I mean, look at conditions in this country for a
mhm.
black man. I mean, I spent an extra year. We were automatically supposed to do 2 years. They made the second year mandatory while I was in Vietnam.
Mm.
I decided not to come home in 1971 because I knew who the hell was shooting at me in those bushes. I knew if something happened in those bushes, I could call in an airstrike on his ass. Couldn't do that in Newark, New Jersey. Couldn't do that in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Look at what was happening in your city in
It's the same way
1970.
people get caught up in gangs though. Like you can be just trying to belong. Somebody
Those
might
were
see something in you and encourage you in a way that nobody else would. And it'll
that,
make you
that's when gangs were initiated. That's when people
mhm.
became used to looking for somewhere to belong. Even if you look at prison society before 1970, it was all about the individual. People that had to join religious cults or religious, those people were considered prey or weaker
Yeah,
because they had to find a group in order to protect themselves. It was no longer about individuality.
but it's like that on every single level. It's like with cults and stuff like that, what they do is they literally it's like being with a woman that is targeting men that she knows look vulnerable and weak, or a man dating a younger woman or a woman that he know is gullible as hell. and they're targeting people that has certain type of characteristics, a certain type of body language. It's things that they have become familiar with in body patterns of others to say, oh yeah, I know that person is open to it or eager for it or seeking something. It's almost like me and my children were watching the Kanye West documentary, and he's at that point to where if the right person introduced something to him, he's so eager that it's easy for you to bite on something and then get you know what I'm saying? It's almost like being
Hmm.
so eager to be with a pretty girl, you get with you know what I'm saying, one of the Kardashians, and that are I think something with that Armenian coochie or something that be making men go crazy because they all go crazy after they mess
Don't
with
they?
them.
Yeah.
But you see the outward appearance and you don't know what comes with that, and if you get sucked into it, it may not even be them purposely trying to do it, but you get caught up into that raft, and then you get they kind of pull you in and you don't realize it, and then you easy, easy targets. It's a
You know,
but
it
and then
really.
sometimes people meet their match. Like the example I use for that is like with R. Kelly. Those girls went looking for something. They would get what they went looking for. They just didn't know the extra stuff that was coming with it. And that is the thing. So a lot of people, those people that prey on people, you got to also make sure that you're not being preyed upon, because you may be going thinking that you about to get over it and they, pull the okey doke on you. So it's doesn't make that person weak. It just means they may have encountered somebody that had a little bit more game, a little bit more, that talk.
Hmm.
Mr. Scott, I think
Hmm.
it would be very interesting or intriguing for you to further investigate into. Well, I don't know whether it's investigate or just looking into the that individual, especially if it's something that you are intrigued about.
Well, it
I
is,
see.
and as Dr. Casey was saying, she kind of explained a lot of the things that I could see how a James could be influenced. I mean, I talked to the guys in the neighborhood, friends. We have a whole thing of 46 people. When I say 46, I mean 46th Street, where we all lived here in Minneapolis. And and I talked to a guy who lived across the street from James. He said, yeah, James was just kind of a loner. James was kind of, if we were doing some, James would never really, it was always just kind of outside. And I think the description of somebody being able to find something or someone or something that now all of a sudden, now I'm this person. I see all these people that are friends and doing all these things that I don't do, but now I can do this. Does it, I mean, that seems to fall into play with that. And he
See,
ended
but
up,
go
Well,
ahead.
see, I can kind of relate to that in my service because I joined the. I didn't join the army to become a soldier. I joined the army to become a paratrooper. I joined the army to become a part of the 101st. If I had been a part of the 82nd or the 173rd, I would probably not be sitting here now with this hat on. This was the group or the esprit de corps that I wanted to achieve.
mm-hmm,
And at that particular time, it was a group where there were very, very few black members. So to me, like your friend James, this was my idea, or when I look back at it now, this was my
yeah,
idea of wanting to
yeah.
belong, or my idea of expressing, the reason why it was okay for me to pursue this particular path.
And if you feel like an outsider, that could make you even more susceptible to
A
being.
leg. The worst thing in the world that I could have
Mm-hmm.
been called during my career was a leg. You understand what I'm talking about, there, Doctor K?
Hmm.
I mean,
Listen, it's easy to get caught up because I mean, First off, when you don't feel like you belong and you're a loner, it's easier to want to take an extra risk or think nobody will care or, anything like that. So, on a spiritual level, just you thinking about it like that, you could be looking into it and allowing his soul to be, relieved and set free to know whatever was bothering him or what type of ties he may have had or may not have had, because he might not have had nothing to do with what they was trying to say it was, and it may
Sure,
have been something totally
sure.
different. And it's almost like with me looking up the stuff about my uncle. Nobody ever really talked about it, but when I look into it, the way that they harassed my grandmother in the police, you know what I'm saying? She's in there talking about her dead son and they towing her car. Like, that's some you know what I'm saying? That's shady. But like literally I'm thinking like, so they know that you in there talking to them about your son that they just killed, and then they tow your car. They will make it seem however they need to make it seem in order to make themselves feel
Yeah.
justified, or you know what I'm saying? Like, they'll give
Mm,
any type of excuse for something in order to justify whatever it is or to make it look like what they need it to be. Like, it might not have been a terror attack, but guess what? If they needed to spin that like that, then guess
yeah.
what they're gonna do?
But
So,
the thing with James though, they really kept me going is when I saw you, I joined the newspapers and I did some research. I found about 30 articles on that incident about James Lawson in different cities. It was in different papers around the country that this had happened.
because that helps them push the agenda, whatever the agenda is. So, like, again,
Yeah,
even if he wasn't into what they made it seem like he was into, that was the agenda that needed to be pushed at that moment. Now, he could have been. I'm not saying that he wasn't, but until cuz it's easy to, now we've said that you did this, so now that's what we're going to run with that. We ain't got to look into nothing else. We ain't got to dig no deeper. We ain't got to do no extra. We can just boop 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 boop. Okay, on to the next case, but and again, when you are a loner, you are more susceptible to those type of things. And normally, if you meet somebody that's cool and they make you feel like family, shh, you in there like swimwear.
yeah. Well, again, he was, it was blown all over the Twin Cities papers. But when I went through the newspapers.com, there was articles in 30 different cities about this incident. Some of them had just been paraphrased from other
Mhm.
articles, okay? But some people had actually tried to tie this to a larger type of
Organization.
movement of things that had been going in other parts of the country that had, as like I say, during that time there was a lot of bombings of federal buildings, draft boards, and it's all in these old newspapers. It's all in there, Like I said, I could sit up all night. I sat up all night a couple nights looking at that.
Listen, I was up the other day, like, oh my God. And then so I am on, they just added me to a family Facebook page for like my grandmother's sisters. Like, I have a big family, is what I'm finding out. But they added me to it. So I'm trying to help them piece together, the history, the family history. And I'm like, listen, I'm overwhelmed. This is a lot, trying to read the old records, some of them blurry, you can't see, then you trying to understand, like, because names is written backwards and just
A
it's
lot of them had the same names. A lot of people in my family had the same name. Tons of
that too,
Walters,
which it
tons
makes
of
it,
Georges.
oh my God. So that was a whole thing because we had the same thing. But then just in general, when I looked up in the newspaper, there were other people, like white people had identical names as black people. It was like, it was really weird. It was really weird. Very interesting.
Yeah,
But
history is,
if nothing else, I understand the systematic way that things are done now, because the way things were done then, the records were so bad. It was all over the place.
well, now they say with these TV shows and things that things like DNA is accurate.
But that's subjective.
DNA is, well, but see, they used to say when I was coming up things like a lie detector test was accurate.
Hmm. Well, see,
And they would
it
convict you. They'd convict you on a lie detector test, and now they say no, that's they give it to you now, but that's
No,
not the
no,
be
no, no,
all.
no. Mr. Scott, I have to correct you there because
Okay.
lie detector was not admissible in court. The fact that law that you failed or passed
Uh,
was not supposed to have any assumption of guilt or innocence. That became rather colored too, but that's another topic. Bill is here. And Bill is usually, I know he's kind of lost right now because usually he's trying to draft a cornerback or a free safety or someone like that. But Bill, how are you doing this evening?
Just fine. I was wondering, speaking of loss, I was like, is it Thursday already? Because when I clicked on the link, it took me to the sports crib. So
Well,
that was an exciting little diversion.
well, someone told me that Thursday that they would probably not be available on Monday.
Yeah,
So,
well, I
uh,
I won't be able to do probably the whole night or
well,
whatever. But yes, I am here.
considering that we started at 6, you will not be doing it the whole night. But anyway, Bill, we were kind of talking. Mr. Scott had a very interesting situation here, and he was wanted to do a story about a childhood friend, and it seems that back in 1970, uh, this particular person was. Uh, well, Mr. Scott, you can fill him in, but fill him in, and then I'll go back to the question.
yeah, just briefly, I had a friend that I grew up with, and he was a guy that just never really, had a lot of friends or in the know, or just he was a guy that was there, but never really gravitated to a particular group or a particular group of people. Like he wasn't an athlete. He wasn't. They didn't have girlfriends. He didn't. He just was a guy that was in the neighborhood. And so he would come by and we would walk to school together because he lived in the neighborhood every now and then. I'd see him and some days he'd knock on the door and for me to go to school with him. And my mom could never get me up. So he's eating my breakfast downstairs until I could get up and go to school. And so one day I'm at school back in Mankato in college and I'm reading a newspaper and I saw that my friend James Lawson was blown up with a bomb on his way to blow up a tech company in Minneapolis called Honeywell. That's what they're saying, how they knew where he was going, how they knew. I don't know any of that, but this is what they printed in the paper. So I became real interested in what happened to James. How did James get involved in something like blowing up? Honeywell was a big
Yeah, I know what Honeywell
military.
was, and they still
Yeah,
exist.
they
Right.
still exist. They still exist, but the headquarters was right by where he was going. That was the headquarters of Honeywell, right on 26th and 4th Avenue, right, not too far from where I live now. And so, as just happened to research, I was just curious about James, how this happened. And so, I ran into a sister one day, and she was telling me, yeah, he was blown up, and we had to go to the hospital, and all we could do was identify him by his dental records. I mean, there was basically nothing. And I said, well, how did James get involved in this? Well, he said, well, he did move to Iowa or something for a while. And then these articles, when I would research it, there was a bunch of articles around the country. And they alluded to some Black Panther involvement. And there was a lot of federal buildings and things that were being bombed around the country at that time.
Right.
So it's something that just piqued my interest as to how James, as a person and we were talking with Dr. Casey, how she was looking at some of the personality things that I explained about James, how that type of person may have got caught into something. But
Well,
I still don't
now,
know. Yeah.
now, Bill, all this was to kind of
parallel or correlate the why James joined a group of Panthers, an elite uh, terrorist group, as opposed to how some of us that were in the military, for instance, those of us airborne, rangers, so forth and so on, how we got caught up in that fraternity also of gravitating toward a particular group in order to make us feel elite.
Yeah, valued, special, a
And
bunch
then
of
wait, Bill, because my thought process is that he might not have even get caught up with none of the stuff that they were saying, and he
right.
might been on a whole
Yeah.
nother something else, and they just put that on him.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of things at work here. Have you tried seeing if his name appears in any of the COINTELPRO papers from the Frank Church Commission?
No.
I would
No.
start there. So a lot of what happened especially during that time period, you said 1970?
Well, we graduated in 68. And so this would have been 69, 70, around that time.
Yeah. So by 1970, and I'm so glad that Brother Williams popped up. A friend of mine who had been a man formerly named Richard D. Moore, who later became Daruba Ben Wahad, made sort of a wry joke about you look to the left of you, look to the right of you, and at a meeting, and by that point, the person on the left, the person on the right was a 50-50 chance that one or both of them were infiltrators. So a lot of what you saw happen by that point in the history of SDS, the Panthers, the John Brown Brigade, Young Lords, AIM, the FBI had gone into overdrive. The person who ran the SAIC, the Special Agent in Charge, who ran operations in this part of the country, which I think included Minnesota as well, was a man named Richard G. Held, H-E-L-D, Dick Held, right? Ironically enough, is what he's also known as. Yeah, we all love that, don't we? He was the person behind what happened on Pine Ridge Reservation. I mean, his name pops up all over the place. If you're a fan of conspiracies, you're gonna love Dick Held. But Richard G. Held, and he's like a 3-generation FBI guy, like his father was, and his son is now, or some may have retired now too. But his son also became a highly ranked FBI agent. And when COINTELPRO was at its peak, right? I mean, like I said, as Daruba Ben Wahad sort of joked, you would go to a meeting. He said, half the people were infiltrators. They were everywhere. And they were the ones who were the most, like the person with the craziest, most militant ideas, like the person who was the most hardcore, they were the FBI, right? They were the ones that wanted to do the craziest thing. Let's go down, let's charge the National Guard Armory. Like that was the infiltrator, right?
Provocateur.
The provocateurs, the infiltrators. And I'm not accusing your friend of anything. I think he may have been influenced by somebody. Obviously I don't know anything about him. I'll do some research, but thankfully, due to the Freedom of Information Act, if he appears at any point in any of those papers, you can find if somebody attempted to recruit him, if somebody attempted to influence him, all that stuff's in there. When I was a graduate student at University of Illinois, I lived on fairly meager means because that's what graduate assistants do, but I bartended at night. And so all my tip money went into FOI requests. So if you tipped me at Coslo's, shout out to Coslo's on Green Street and I think 910 South Green, don't quote me on that, in beautiful Champaign, Illinois back in the day. That's where your money went, people. It went towards me amassing quite a nice little dossier on a bunch of people associated with COINTELPRO. And it's one of those things where, I can almost picture at the end of the Church Commission when they're talking to, all the top people at the FBI, and they're saying, you're not going to do this stuff anymore. And the guys are like putting their hands behind their back and crossing their fingers. Never again, they certainly got better at it. I mean, in terms of not being so obvious about certain things, I will say that. But when you've had the kind of, and they still think COINTELPRO as a success. Like if you look at their internal documents, though they regret, like I said, getting exposed, At no point did they say, "Oh, it was a failure," or, "Oh, we went too far." No. Even to this day, young FBI agents, when they're taught about COINTELPRO, I mean, they say, maybe some of the things in terms of execution weren't exactly on point, but they very much believed in what it accomplished, what it did, how it destabilized. I mean, a laundry list of organizations, right? I mean, literally a laundry list of organizations. They were in everything, even stuff that you don't think of as like them. They infiltrated them, like, really, like they were infiltrating everybody because it's like an addict, right? They had so much success. Well, we went so well with the Panthers, and let's try this Democratic Society. Well, that went well too. Well, gosh, how about this? Oh, really? They infiltrated. I mean, literally, like I don't know if they got to the Girl Scouts, but I wouldn't be shocked if they had. They went nuts, man. So I don't know what happened to your friend. And was it LARSEN or SON? What was the last name?
Yeah, James Lawson, LAWSON.
SON. Okay, Okay, I thought it was Larson. Lawson. Okay.
Lawson.
And 69 or 70 was when the incident took place where he perished.
Yes.
If you can give me an exact date, I'll do some digging.
I will. I'll go because I've got a bunch of notes of things that I'm putting together, and I'll pull that out, and
I'll give him your email, Bill. I'll give him your email.
I've got Bill's. I got Bill's email. I emailed him something last week. So.
That's right. Okay. You did. Yes, you did. It's like, oh, look at you. Yeah. So yes, if you find an exact date.
Hey, Bill, he was on the road. He went to my website. He emailed you. He was just on the go.
You can tell this is a man who wants to, draw us in, right? He wants to bring us closer.
But that's how you get a lot of knowledge. This is what you're talking to people in different locales, different areas, different. This is really what knowledge to me is really all about, and it's I enjoy spending the time doing it because I do get something.
New connections, deep into
the rap game give you a lot of knowledge too, though.
I don't know how to feel here. I mean, I'm the only one.
And I did get knowledge on the rap game from Dr. Casey. I was surprised about that, but I the genre is something that I'm not a tremendous fan of. I think that there's so much the repetitive stuff where the actual meanings, like I say, the genre of blues. I listen to blues channels. They got clubs here. They say they're blues. They're not playing any blues. I don't know what they're playing, but they call it that. When you listen to the Muddy Waters, that stuff can make your hair stand up on your head because they're talking about something. It's a spiritual thing. It's more than just the notes.
Mr. Scott, people are not that hungry anymore. Now they can go.
They're not that in tune with themselves anymore.
Now they can go to Sam's Club and buy a petite filet mignon.
Well, let me jump in on this part because this goes right back to what Bill just got through talking about with COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO, as well as FBI, the modern day FBI counterintelligence program, ran a super big number on the hip hop industry.
Yep.
I want you, if nothing else, Anthony, look up a person called Professor Griff. Go to his channel. He was a member of Public Enemy, a hip hop group called Public Enemy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Go look him up on YouTube. He has a whole channel where he constantly teaches the public about how the hip hop industry was saturated with concepts that's meant to put the black people to sleep, concepts that's meant to water down the real message of what hip hop means versus rap, and goes into all kinds of conspiracy as to the same stuff that happens in Hollywood, as to what they do their whole thing to try to make hip hop artists gay, would make hip hop artists talk about things that has to do with consumer spending and subject matters that don't mean anything, and the whole aspect of how that is intentional in order to continue to make a generation of people fall asleep and be self-destructive. And
in most cases,
the point is that's intentional by the industry.
Right.
All right.
In most cases, you have to speak in riddle in order to really be effective in the
Correct.
entertainment world. Because if you try to be direct about anything, they
You
will
won't get a deal.
blacklist you.
Yep.
And even if you got a deal, they'll put you on the shelf.
Yep.
It takes, and unless you have some type of your own funding, like we're in a space now where entertainment can be what we really want it to be versus what they're allowing us to have,
Right.
because those are two different levels of content. What they allow us to have and what we want is two different things, and we're still just in the baby stages of coming out of being controlled in such a way to where we don't have any control.
Right.
So, and then again, because if they gonna give you money to make certain type of rap, if you do anything outside of that, then they gonna have to sit you down, or they're gonna try to, because they need you to, one, is back to that agenda that we was talking about even with your friend. It's a certain type of agenda that they want pushed. So they're not looking for the conscious, woke, spiritually sound rappers. Those are the ones that's getting picked over. They'll go with the makeshift copy print version of it, the pixelated version of the woke person, because that other person is naive enough to just go with whatever they say. So it's easier to go with somebody who is eager to get money more than they are to push their message. When you get people that are more about their message than about their money, because the money will eventually come, then you will change the way things are as of now. But it's a struggle to make that change because so many people, I mean, and we've heard it for years and years and years. You got a couple of things that go on. You got hazing that goes on, that people think it's just like in school and colleges, but the same thing goes on in any type of entertainment where they make
Mhm.
you do certain things. They're trying to see how far you will go. I think that I haven't gone as far as I could possibly be, because most of the time they want you to do some homosexual type of activity. It's almost like so they can have a one up on you. They want you to be able
Oh,
to say, um, they want to, in general, it's like in order to cross these lines, we got to get something compromising on you so that if you do something, or if you break the confidentiality, or if you do what we don't like, then we can throw this up in your face, or we can blackmail you with it. And it's just like that. That's the way it's
Dr.
always been, I think.
Dr. Casey, I'm going to put you here on the spot because you're on the show with four black men.
Right.
So I want to talk to you about the feminization of black masculinity as opposed to the subject that we've talked about, I think last week or the week before, black men being able to be in touch with their so-called soft feminine side without becoming or uh, 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 illuminating, I guess, that homosexuality uh, 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 angle.
Okay, so the the thing is that it's not about being feminine. It's about knowing how to encompass, process, and establish your emotional wheelhouse. And it's really not even about being feminine. It's about um the feminine energy that most people are talking about is not even like a feminine energy. It's not like, hey child. It's not like that. Um it's more of a, I can cry and I still whoop your ass after I get finished crying, versus a lot of men especially think that if you cry that you're weak. And a lot of women, now some women aren't mature enough to handle a man that is emotionally intelligent. I'm gonna be honest with you. Every woman can't handle that. Some women will take that and try to use that against you. But if you're dealing with a mature woman, then she wants to know that um when she feel pain, you feel pain. Like, and not in a we gonna be in the corner crying together because then what the baby's gonna do. You know what I'm saying? But in a way to where if I am going through something, you can embrace that and feel that and encompass that emotionally with me, and not me feeling like he's just here.
Mr. Scott, are you able to relate to what Dr. Casey's saying?
Well, no, yeah, I mean, I guess I wanted to just clear up something too first about the rap game. And my thoughts is really about, okay, when I watched the what was the big Super Bowl thing with the rappers and the big show that was put on.
It was a marvelous show.
I'm looking from a position that, I've played instruments. I mean, I was a music major when I started out in college, and I don't see those type of, my dad grew up in Chicago. Okay, he went to DuSable High School, graduated. I mean, his classmates were some of the greatest jazz musicians in history. I mean, Johnny Griffin, Gene Ammons, Eddie Harris, and I had a chance to meet a lot of these people, and they're superlative at what they do musically. And see, and when I listen to some of the things now, music has changed, it's technical. There's a lot of technology involved in it now than more so than in the past. But for instance, when I watched the Super Bowl show and I saw the Dr. Dre at the piano, he didn't look like he could play that piano to me. I mean, just from someone who's been around pianists and have played for it myself, the band, it was like all pantomiming. It was all a pantomime type of a thing. And I think I'd like to see musicians that are onto their music as a craft, and also with the message. And I hear exactly what you're saying, Dr.
Instruments aren't even the same as they were back then. The whole concept of musical instruments are totally different. If you go into a
Mr. Scott,
guitar
do you know
store,
how to turn on a drum machine?
That's a good question. No, I've never used it. I've played with many live drummers.
see, those
See, I
machines are a
mean,
lot
right,
different.
right. I mean, right now you can
Oh,
go.
I go and record with the guy. He can pull up any drummer that
Right,
he wants on the song.
any drummer,
He can pull up Dollar Power drummer. He can pull up any drummer that he wants to use on the song.
he can almost, if he
But
has the right equipment, he can also pull up any instrument that he wants.
yeah,
He can almost do everything through a machine
I,
except put on vocals. Come on, Brother Williams. Take
I know
Mr.
people
Scott
can
through
sell
Well,
beats.
I
Just the beat.
I showed y'all a drum machine last week.
Yeah,
Right behind me is this thing here. I don't know what you call it, but Anthony, you might be able to tell me what this is called. You know what I mean? You might be able to tell me what it's called. I can
I got a baby
pan
grand
I can
upstairs.
pan over to a $4,000 keyboard. You might be able to tell me what it's called. It's called a Phantom. It's one of the recent keyboards that just came out. I got a digital wind synth upstairs that can imitate any type of brass instrument you got. I mean, to
Imitate.
say that hip hop artists don't know how to play instruments is not true at all.
Sure.
I mean, you again, this goes right back to what we talked about the concept of what goes on in terms of what's portrayed. Is what's portrayed versus what the reality is. And of course, when you talk about it from the perspective of not knowing the reality of what goes on, then it does appear to be that way. But there are some very powerful entertainers. It's just that going back to the Chitlin circuit, okay, I got to start there. All right. Nowadays, it is just not like that. The competition is not in being good at your craft because we're not simply held in a position of where you have to be the best guitarist or the best singer or this and that. We don't have to compete against each other to that type of degree. And so things are more open. And now from that standpoint, the music industry in terms of artists is oversaturated. So and everybody can play the guitar, so or keyboard or this or that. So it is not there's not a drive for that. Okay, so from that, in regards to also what happens with the different genres of hip hop happens to be more of a drum, a percussion based environment. That's where the emphasis is going to be placed. But that don't mean that they don't know how to play instruments, bro. I'm sorry.
Well,
That's fact.
and I may have misspoke to a point on that,
Mr. Scott.
but
I could give you I could give you a
I
female
do-
Instagram page right now that can twerk and play the piano at the same time.
Yep. And the flute. Play the flute and twerk at the same time. Too.
But I'm saying, my brother that was,
And
I
she
was
sound
saying,
like Whitney, the girl I'm talking about.
he's had a stroke. He's not playing now, so those bands do call me to kind of sit in with them. And some of these songs, like I say, there's 2 notes, 3 notes in the song. I mean, it's just real. There's a hook, and it just goes on and on and on about the same thing. This one song, all about the bass, and it's just one bass line all the
A
way.
lot of old songs did that, Mr.
So
Scott.
I mean,
don't
maybe
know if you
it's a
realize that.
concept of when you're playing it. And bands, some of them would even play records while we're playing the song. You play along, almost like a karaoke, where you're playing along. It's
Karaoke.
Karaoke.
Close enough.
No, that is not close enough. That is not close
Mr. Scott.
right.
Mr. Scott. Okay, so let me ask you, what was this?
I'm not sure.
Hold on, James. What was this? Rolling. Who? Roll. That was the same thing over and over and over again.
Well,
Mr.
we just
Scott.
got to say James Brown. Come on, James Brown made the riff.
James Brown really made a lot of the hip hop. They've taken his beats. They've taken Mike Stubblefield and Jimmy Nolan and all those licks. The actual people
from like Pass the Peas or a whole bunch of. I mean, there's a long list of James Brown songs that I can tell you which sample. In Cherokee. I mean, there's a whole bunch of classic songs that have been sampled, and
there was a lot of people that was sampling back then, and we ain't no sample.
Songs.
You have to know the art of it. The whole point is to give most of the time, at least currently now, not when hip hop first came out in terms of samplers, but when samplers first hit the scene, you're absolutely right, Anthony. But now people sample pretty much to give homage to the oldies. Sure. Right. And it's more of an expressive art, because if you call yourself trying to sample now because you don't have the talent, it won't even get cleared. It won't even get cleared because you got to pay publishing. And there are plenty of artists have learned the hard way by getting sued behind that. Yeah. So it really varies, but you can't go into it with the negative connotation that the style of music is not artistic, and that they don't have the ability to actually express music and be involved in music as you were back in the day. It's a
lot of storytelling going on.
Mr. Scott, I think you have I'm going to give you the title of being the oldest mind on our show.
I don't even know necessarily the oldest mind.
James, you're hip hop, and you sang, and your clothes are sagging, James.
No, hold it now. Sagging clothes and hip hop is 2 different things.
Yep.
But
Mr. Scott said, pants on the ground, pants on the ground. You walk around town with your pants on the ground.
But Mr. Scott, I also remember when your grandmother told you that you better take off them damn jeans that were 3 inches above your damn platform shoes. Don't you recall those days? Do you recall the days?
A lot of that sagging is because
actually I saw some platform shoes in my closet the other day. I actually saw some in my closet.
My son has gotten taller.
You were told that you better go out, that you better comb that nappy hair and not braid it up, boy. Your sister wore braids, not you. Mm-hmm. Do you remember those days, Mr. Scott?
Not really. I had braids.
Well, Scott, I sent you the link, by the way. I sent you an email link of Professor Griff going over the psychological warfare against hip hop. When you get
Thank you.
time,
I
just watch
appreciate that.
that.
I
Just when you get
appreciate
time,
that.
just watch that. You're
I
gonna
will
find
definitely,
a
definitely.
few people that are of your generation that are gonna shock you in terms of their contribution to the destruction of rap music. Just
Mhm.
so you know. And I drop one big name on you and leave it at that. Quincy Jones. And I'm
Oh,
not gonna say anything more. Now I'm not gonna say anything more. I'll let you
But you
go
know
into
what
that,
though? It was a
and
lot of
then you start
foolishness
seeing some
going
stuff.
on back then, Mr. Williams. It was a lot of foolishness and a lot of stepping fetching, I would call it. And even the way that they went about silencing Prince and Michael Jackson, like it was a lot of trickery. But it has always been whatever to keep you stifled. That's what they're gonna do. But it's not just in entertainment; it's in every single industry
Right.
that
Correct.
can be imagined.
Correct.
Well,
Speaking of trickery, everyone, and Bill, I want you to kind of chime in on this first. This military mission to the Ukraine, is this a part of the trickery to keep black minds and voters away from the political crisis here in our own country?
They jumped from that COVID to this
Right.
war, and you
Precisely.
quick
That's
one
Bill.
fear to another.
Your
well,
thoughts, Bill. I mean,
I'm gonna since I didn't
and
get a chance to
going,
say what I was trying to say before, I'm gonna tie
go.
these things all together. So I had the opportunity to get to know a man named Felipe Coronel Jr., who people who listen to hip hop but know as Immortal Technique.
Oh,
Um,
right.
I got to know him a little bit. Got to know Talib Kweli Green a little bit. In fact, we were semi neighbors when I lived in Brooklyn. Um, got to know Boots Riley a little bit, and Boots is a piece of work. He's a fascinating individual with a mind that goes in several different directions at once. You can start out talking blues music with him, and end up, on Antonio Gramsci by the time you get to the end of the conversation. Uh, when people talk about, you're talking about misdirection, right? That's what you're talking about,
Mm.
and it ties right back into what we're talking about before about hip hop and rap and Vanilla Ice and all these other things, and you can tie it into, what happened with people like Elvis Presley, and you can tie it back to the whitewashing of jazz. I know of people who say they don't like jazz, and what they mean is they don't like what they hear in the dentist's office. They've never heard jazz in their lives. I mean, not real jazz. Like if I were to play Sonny Stitt for them, their head would fall off. They have no idea what jazz is. Um, so all the things we're talking about tying together. So when people like the Watts Prophets and Gil Scott Heron and the Last Poets and others first began, and you wouldn't argue that wasn't music, right? You wouldn't argue that was something
Right.
that had been, that lacked musicality, that lacked beauty, that lacked poetry. I mean, it was literally poetry. And those are the great grandparents of people like Kendrick Lamar and many others. What happened and is still happening, right? There's many a slip between the cup and the lip. What has happened and is still happening is when you have a control apparatus, for lack of a way of describing it, that says we're going to allow a certain amount of good stuff to slip through, but not too much, right? Because if we shut it all off, then eventually it'll burst out someplace, right? It's like making sure you have a pressure release valve. You can't shut it all the way off, right? Because right, pipe burst.
Yep.
So you allow a little bit through, right? We're going to let Public Enemy through for a little while, right? Until we later have to kind of cut them off at the nutsack. We're going to let
remove Professor Griff.
right. We're going to let I mean, Paris. Well, Paris got cut off pretty quickly because his second album. I mean, he almost got thrown in jail for his second album. But yeah, there's I mentioned Talib Kweli, right? Reflection Eternal, and Black Star, and everything. And eventually it got to the point where Yasin Bey has almost completely left the music industry, right? I mean, he's still will occasionally pop up and do a little something, and does some acting and things like that. But it's, if you are somebody who is going in this direction that is a direct antecedent, like directly related to what you had come out of people like Gil Scott-Heron, like the Watts Prophets, like the Last Poets, they won't completely shut you down, but they will definitely, tighten up or loosen based on certain things, right? Because they don't want to just take you out altogether, because then that's what the story is, how they took you out. Instead, if they can water you down a little bit here and there, or redirect you, or slow you down, or have some controversy sideline you for a while. You said, what about Jews? Or whatever it is that ends up tying you up with that for a while, until they're ready to let you back off the sidelines with a new set of parameters about what you can and can't do. But I mean, if you are at all familiar with Amir Questlove Thompson, you cannot say that they're not tremendous musicians in hip hop. I mean, Amir is like a musicologist. Anybody you can name, he can talk for 20 minutes on in the history of American music. He is amazing. His podcast, if you love music, you would love Amir Questlove podcast. And despite the fact that the man is in his, I guess, early to mid 40s, he is very conversant on, name somebody, Scott Joplin. Whoever it is you want to bring up, he's conversant extremely on anybody you can throw out there. And, the roots are clearly tied into, hence the name The Roots, to the very beginnings of Black music in America. Like everything, they do some of everything, and it's all in there. So yes, you can see them doing like swinging and using things that come from the jazz idiom, and using things that come from the blues idiom, and things that come from rock, because rock was ours, for those who somehow forgot it, and things that come obviously from hip hop. All those things are in there, right? And even some little things from spirituals. Everybody remembers when Kanye, and Kanye is a complicated individual, but he's another guy that has an extremely deep understanding of music. He knows music theory. He knows music history. I've talked to him. And is he an odd duck? Yes. But does he know music? Oh, most certainly, yes.
Yeah,
and we were talking about like people, and if they play piano, or if they play whatever instruments. I know who taught Tim Mosley piano. He's my best friend in the world. His name's Wesley Van Kilgore. And one of his piano students was Timothy Mosley, aka Timberland. And Timberland has a great depth of musical knowledge. So while there are some people who are pretenders to the throne, and all they know how to do is, as you said, they know enough to program this and use that, whatever. But even Lil Wayne decided to learn to play guitar. He's not good, but he can play a guitar. So there's still an interest in knowing things about music. It's not like people lost that desire. But here's what I will say, and no one's talking about it. We lost a bunch of musical programs. There was a time when America's high schools, you mentioned Chicago, right? There used to be what's called the Merit Music Program in Chicago. And it was called the Merit Music Program because if you're a poor kid or rich kid, whatever, you could still audition for it, right? If you were a kid who didn't have two nickels to rub together, but you have musical talent, you'd have an opportunity to work with, name somebody, right? Whoever, you'd suddenly be backing Billy Eckstein at 17 years old, right? Because you got into the Merit Music Program. Ben Vereen and a long list of others got into that Merit Music Program, and they got defunded, like so many other programs got defunded. So a lot of your friends, and I don't know, that you're talking about who grew up in Chicago, I bet if they grew up in the 40s, 50s, and even in the 60s, they probably weren't all in the Merit Music Program, but they were all, if they weren't in that, they were in other excellent musical programs. Now, many of our high schools don't have musical programs at all. Not even like, they may have a marching band, if that. But it used to be they'd have a marching band, an orchestra, right? They would have like even little chamber ensembles in high schools, jazz ensembles in high schools, right? Now, check where you live now. Just call around and say, what's your music program like? And someone will tell you, oh, we have, such and such. We have a chorus, right? Most of them haven't got, because chorus is cheap. So they probably still have chorus. But see how many of them have like an orchestra now or a jazz band, right? If they have anything left, it's marching band, if that. But That's the other thing that's changed.
Yeah.
Where these kids don't learn music, right? I mean, unless your parents are going to pay for private music lessons, a lot of these kids are doing what they can. You can download, in fact, if you're not afraid of piracy, you can download for free everything you need to start making music on your laptop or even your phone, right?
Yeah.
Without a single musical lesson. You just have to have the interest and, like I said, download the stuff and teach yourself how to use that software program. But if someone can't buy you a musical instrument and teach you how to play it because you live in a neighborhood where there's not a single music program in any place, right? They used to be at the rec center when I was a kid. They had music programs at the rec center. Not even if say somebody your school didn't have one, your parents could drop you off in the summertime and say so and so wants to learn tap or ballet or, in my case, cornet for some reason. I don't know why I picked cornet, but cornet. You could learn at the rec center for the kids that weren't athletic or whatever. You could do that. How many of the rec centers, how many of the park district buildings or centers near where you live still have music? I bet very few of them. So that's the other thing you have to factor in. And back to what you were saying, to sort of tie it in a big old bow. I mean, wars are good for business, James. I mean, sometimes you have to dig too deep. I mean, you don't need a special reason to start a war. Wars are good for business. I mean, if you're an oil-producing nation, woo! Baby, that pure white albino tiger you wanted, go ahead and get it. Hey, that other boat, the yacht to tow our smaller yacht behind, go ahead and get it. We all know that wars make money, but think of what's going on now. And people are saying, oh my God, I can't believe gas is $6.37 a gallon. Do you think that a war that started less than a month ago had that quick an effect on the gasoline supply? I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but just think about it. Do you know how long it takes, even a war, right, to actually affect what's already in the quote unquote pipeline? Not literally a pipeline in this case, so some of it you can use that. Some of it is still in the pipeline, but it would take several months for that to actually affect the price of gas. But gas has gone up over $1 in some places. Wars are good for business, James. I mean, the other stuff is sort of an extra added bonus, but that's why we're having a war, so somebody can make money.
I like to jump in on this too.
I said that ever since Vietnam, but go ahead, Brother Wade.
And I'm going to go to veteranstoday.com. Veteranstoday.com. They got an article titled Ukraine and the Nazis. And I'm just going to read part of what it says. Ever since 2015, the CIA has been running a training camp for Nazis in Ukraine to act as a military deterrent to Russia. This is in veteranstoday.com. You hear me? So when we talk about the idea of how can people be racist in a time of war, there are two things that is really used to emphasize racism: war and religion. Those are the two branches of emphasis on racism. So it's just kind of weird to me when people feel like because folks are fighting, they should be more humanitarian like and let down their vices. This is when you act on those vices is in war. So the mere fact to me, especially when we're talking about a safe haven for white nationalists and neo-Nazis, and apparently people seem to have forgotten that in Ukraine, how is it not a surprise that Black people, Africans, whatever, would have an issue being able to leave the country?
Yep.
I do have to look at the history. And again, James, this is in a website catered toward veterans, mind you. I'm gonna let that speak for itself.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
The CIA has cozied up to Nazis since the CIA wasn't the CIA, since the CIA was still the OSS. I mean, when you look at things that happened in Chile and lots of parts of South America where there were Nazi strongholds, right? Argentina, Chile, and other places, Bolivia as well. The CIA was even before it was CIA, but once it shifted from being OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, to the CIA, they maintained relationships with these Nazis. So it's not, it's not shocking or surprising to anyone who pays attention. I even saw an interview being done with one of the quote unquote resistance leaders who had attempted to sort of rebrand himself, but over his shoulder, though he blurted out, I guess. It was like a Zoom call or whatever they'd done. He sort of blurred his background, but I know how to use Google image search. The picture over his shoulder was this like legendary leader of their neo-Nazi movement. But the Russians have plenty of neo-Nazis on their side too. I mean, there's plenty of that going around all over the place.
Right.
So like, don't make that the reason why you choose one side over the other. Trust me, they've got Nazis on both sides. Yeah. But the thing that I would just urge anyone to remember is that when a war starts, as the old saying goes, right, the first casualty is the truth. The things that, and of course, I mean, Zelensky is a person that we talked about Trump. Look at his path to the presidency. He literally played someone on a television show, head of state, who unexpectedly becomes president. Like, it's amazing. Sometimes they don't bother hiding anything. It's like, hey, here's a TV show about this guy who probably shouldn't be president becoming president. And his background as an actor has helped him tremendously. He's done well, very well, in shaping public messaging, mostly externally focused, right? Because the people of the Ukraine, one is their power is out most parts of the Ukraine now. So you can't really broadcast much to them. Most of what's being sent out is going out to Europe, America, and other places. But and while I wish the people of Ukraine well, and I hope that this ends as quickly as possible with them retaining their ability to self-determine. There are some things that have happened on both sides, as has been alluded to before. There are parts of Ukraine where certain elements, I guess one would say, are strongly pro-Russia because once again, this was part of Russia not that long ago, as Russia is very keen on reminding us. And it's almost like that phantom limb thing that they keep reaching for the Ukraine, and what happened? It's been amputated. So they feel entitled, frankly, to Ukraine. Now, whether that entitlement is something that we should support or stand by and allow to happen, whatever, is a whole other question. But there's a lot of history there. And this is, once again, why I'm such a student of history, is if you really, 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 really study history, you will find a lot of things that if you just look at what's happened in the last, 30 days or whatever it is other people who don't like history like to do with their lives, I can't even imagine not delving into history. I have no way of even imagining what that, it must be like, like living like a reptile or something where everything's new and exciting. But if you really look, there's a bunch of tendrils and gnarled and intertwined roots that go all over different parts of Europe, quite frankly, and go back to, generations long fist fights that people had and are now re-adjudicating generations later, and we'll probably go at it again in another several generations. It's funny when I hear when this thing first jumped off and you heard the commenters like, I can't believe we're having a war in Europe. It's like, what? What? The place where they had a war called the 100 Years' War? That Europe? The Europe where, like, the Lutherans wanted to slaughter the Presbyterians because they slightly interpreted, their particular version of Protestantism just this much differently, right? It's like French vanilla, no vanilla. I mean, this is what they had bloodbaths over. So you can't tell me, like, there's so much weird messaging out there about certain things. Europe is a naturally warlike place that managed to keep it quiet for a while. Like, what the heck? How late is it? It's late enough. These people have been slaughtering each other and anyone else they can get their hands on forever.
Yeah.
Forever. And all they need is the slightest excuse. We had a world war that started because the inbred third cousin of a bunch of other kings got assassinated. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was a political non-entity. Nobody knew or cared about Franz Ferdinand, but as soon as he was assassinated, boom, World War I, right? I mean, literally, he was related to everyone else, though, right? He was related to Kaiser Wilhelm. He was related to Queen Victoria, to Tsar Nicholas. So he was a minor relation, though. Like, it wasn't like he was their brother. He was like, a third cousin 14 times removed. But it was enough. It was enough.
He was a play date. He was a play date. That's what he was. In modern terms, he was a play date.
Sure, right. They'd seen him before at a reunion or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Oh, over there. Yeah, the kind of one with the kind of the one lazy eye. Yeah, him. Yeah. Oh, that's who it was. Well, we got to have a world war. So it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. It's like dry tinder in the the highlands of California, like go like 80 miles, north and east of Los Angeles. If you drop your cigarette or whatever, whoosh, right? We're gonna lose 14 million acres probably. So this is what Europe is like. It doesn't take much.
Mr. Scott,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to try to kind of wrap this up, but Mr. Scott, do you find it rather amusing, for lack of another word, that we can find $1 billion for the Ukraine, but we can't find $10 million to stop the closing of the school in your community?
Amusing? Well, like I say, the schools are just Minneapolis. They're going on strike tomorrow. Governor has bragged about a $9 billion tax surplus right here in Minnesota. So the teachers are like, well, why don't we have computers for the kids? Why don't we have all the things the kids need? Why are we get the lowest pay of any school district in Minnesota? We're the largest school district. So, yeah, I mean, what they do with their money is, governor gets out and says, I've got a $9 billion surplus. Oh, what do we do with it? I don't know what to do with it. Well, you shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be there if you don't know what to do with it.
How do you get a $9 billion surplus when your budget is only $600 million?
Well, I can't comment on numbers. I mean,
somebody messing up the money.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm talking about messing it up bad too.
What I read, so
we addressed this. Me, you, Mr. Mr. Tucker, Mr. Scott, and Don all addressed this on the program on Saturday. How do you get $1 billion surplus from a $600 million budget?
Well, again, I think Dr. Casey answered that question.
I mean, they've been messing up the money for a few years with that type of surplus. This didn't just start. That was something that's been going on for a long time. They might need to do an audit. They might need a triple audit.
Well, right now with these schools closing, they've already gone through the COVID. They were just getting kids back into schools where people can go back to work. People are trying to get their daycare and everything set up. Now, all of a sudden, tomorrow, no school. So what are they going to do with the kids? The kids, they need to be in school. They need to be getting some type of education. And it's not happening. And I think St. Paul, as I was saying earlier, will probably be on strike shortly. They're in negotiations right now. So that's what's going on up here.
Brother Williams, I want you to kind of address something that Bill spoke about a little bit earlier. We have an 11-day war and a $2, at least out here in California, a $2 jump per gallon in gas. What the hell?
Well, to me, that's just really capitalism. Is all it is.
Ding, ding,
Is
ding.
that they don't want to lose the profit margin. It has, and then I noticed that you referenced before, if the United States has reserve, why is it going up? Because that's the word reserve basically means in the event of an emergency. The United States is not in a state of emergency as it applies to that. The citizens of the United States can still pay for gas, can still afford to buy high price gas. Nobody's riding. Nobody's going to, basically, for the most part, are going to stop using gas. We're not going to boycott. So why not, from that standpoint? Why not keep the profit margin going the way it's going?
And the
So
pandemic showed you that it's easy to manipulate us with fear.
yeah, and so I to me, it's the status quo. It's to be expected. And not only that, when you think about it, when people expect it, especially with the media pushing it, then part of the bite already comes out of it. We get upset, we get frustrated, we don't like it, but we know it's coming. We get used to the fact that they're telling us it's coming. So part of that that rage that would actually cause us to go toward action gets quelled in the fact that they've already let you know ahead of time that these things are happening. So if anything, instead of people actually uh, organizing and to make a change and boycotting, we're gonna go buy more toilet tissue and empty the shelves. That's usually the response versus any real action that happens is the lack of being able to go get toilet tissue and water.
James
So
said that war makes money, panic makes more money than war.
I think I look at panic as a condition, is as part of a condition of war. But to me, war in itself makes more money. And I would say this: let's just look at what we've been already talking about in regards to just music industry. It has to do with the weaponization of things and using things against a population or using things against the those that are not in the know and those that are ignorant, and in those that are forced to not be able to be involved in the politics and involved in governing and anything that has to do with how change is truly made. So most of us are a slave to our environment, a slave to the rat race that we're involved in. And as a result, we have enough distractions, going back to social media, going back to video games, going back to all of the different things that we can be involved in. And we got enough creature comforts here in the United States to where the average person is too far gone in their day-to-day dealings to turn back and actually, you know, take an enhanced step toward making a difference now. And then as when you listen to Bill talk, you really get to learn how much we don't know as a people about what's really going on. And education, it just doesn't have the same uh, impression that it had back in the day when it was something that we had to fight for versus something that now it's available to you. And then I think about the disease that Bill referenced when he talked about, I can't even imagine myself not wanting to learn about history. Well, the disease to that, Bill, is called being addicted to TikTok and your 10-second clips. Again, distraction. So there are a lot of people that would beg to differ that, wow, what would I do with history? I got all of these things at my access. And so
Yeah.
unfortunately, things have been weaponized against us to the point to where the concept of war doesn't even really make sense to us. Again, I come on this show every Monday and say we are at war as a people.
Yes, sir.
We are at war. So knowing that black folks are at war and we've been at war for over 400 plus years versus the 100-year war Bill talks about, when are we gonna wake up and recognize that? We caught up in this Ukraine thing. We've been at war for a lot longer than that. The continent of Africa has been at war and been carved up a lot longer than that. So that's my take on it.
I want to say this to Emmitt Smith, man. And your conscience is implanted.
I knew that. See, I knew automatically who that had to be. It was no doubt. But uh, uh, Brother Williams, you bring up a great point. We have been at war for hundreds of years, and we have been refugees in this country for hundreds of years. So I don't know. Has the lack of suffering been the reason why this generation does not take note of our history?
Well, to me, it's I wouldn't say let's not blame it all on a generation, because I see it as being slow
No.
poison. It's slow poison, right? So this generation suffers from the disconnect, and we see it even when we on this show. The disconnect between the elder generation and the young generation, and these disconnects continue to show themselves up more and more and more, and you have now resentment between the ages that feed into everything that we should be building upon, whether it be our elders and our youth. So to me, it's the family dysfunctionality that exists, that continues to eat at everything else and continues to be able to be weaponized against us as a people. And
So
that's what I see.
So I would like to interject because you talked about a disconnect between the generations, and I believe that your interpretation of TikTok um suggests and emphasizes and illustrates the disconnect, because a lot of times what I see on TikTok that's reposted. Now, I have TikTok. I don't really use TikTok, but I see a lot of TikToks reposted. And a lot of times what I see is educational facts, historical facts, and things of that nature, where people are still using those type of platforms to educate and to build up people and to help those platforms not to be dull. But even when you talk about war being more money than panic, war is panic. That is the embodiment of panic. Whether it is in the place that is being attacked, um, or if it's in the surrounding places that fear getting attacked. When you talk about the gas prices going up, some of that is just price gouging. Some of that is just
Yeah,
knowing that,
definitely.
well, I know that they panicked 2 years ago, around the same week they went through a panic, and we was able to jack all the prices for everything up, and everything went off the shelf. So you know what? On our anniversary for the pandemic, we're gonna run it back. And an unfortunate way of saying it, this is what happens a lot. It's just a cycle of game being ran. And
Mm.
okay, well, I see where this worked, so I'm gonna keep doing this until that don't work no more, and then we're gonna do something else. It's almost like we're gonna put it was Ebola, it was some other flu, it was something else, then it was Katrina, then it was something else, then it was something else, then it was COVID, then it was something. It's always going to be something that's going to put people in a panic. And it's crazy because I remember reading something to say the way that y'all acted about tissue and about gas, I understand why they don't tell us about aliens, because people don't know how to take information in and digest it and process it. Kind of like what we were talking about with the emotions. People don't know how to process information. They don't know how to comprehend it in a way to where they can grow from it. So we're looking at um the regeneration of false information. And it's so crazy because we were talking about all this education and fighting to get education, but a lot of times the fighting to get education is equivalent to fighting for misinformation, because they're not really telling us the right thing all the time. It's more of the trickery. um
Hmm.
and it makes me think about, when I'm saying that, it makes me think about when Dr. King say, I feel like I done just did all of this. I'm paraphrasing, but for lack of better terms, he said, I done took him into a burning house and I ain't realized the bitch was burning. Now we all about to die. And it is really the realization of us thinking that we're saving ourselves by fighting for all of these things. And I'm not saying that it's making it worse, but it's definitely not making it any better, or we haven't seen the better as of yet, to a degree where we could say, you know what, in 1960 whatever, we was going through something that in 2020 something we ain't going through. We still going through the same exact shit. Ain't shit
Insane.
changed. The shit ain't work. Ain't what are we doing? What are we doing? But as long as one as long as you give the understanding, and this will be my closing. As long as you give the understanding that the older generation is doing something different than the younger generation, or like there is no band of unity, or we don't see eye to eye, it keeps us kind of at odds. So now we're not
Yeah.
talking about the things that we need to discuss so that we can really plan and make things, make the adjustments in how we move forward. Because a lot of times everything that older people did wasn't wrong, but there are some adjustments that need to be made so that we can strategically move forward. And it's two problems with that. One, we are very loud in our movements, more times than not, but then we're very reactionary. So instead of us being loud and like this is what we gonna do, and hoping that they correct the problem so we don't have to do it, we be super loud super late, like y'all did all of this. Well, why wasn't y'all mad before? Y'all seen it come. It's like they warn us, but when even when they do warn us, even when we do see the trinklets of something happening, we don't do what we need to do to actually prevent it from taking place. And that's where the biggest gap is, if you ask me. Because I mean, um, with the information or without the information, if nothing is being done, and who gives a fuck about the information? The information is pointless if it's not being used the correct way, because if you don't get it, then you don't know. But if you do get it and you're not doing nothing, then why do you even know? It's
That's the cycle. That's the vicious cycle.
Uh, Mr. Scott, how do you feel? Have we as elders
Well,
failed our younger generation?
it's not a failure.
No,
I,
no, no. I want to know how. I mean, from that particular point of view, there's a few years between your generation and Mr. Scott's, just like between mine and yours. But
well,
Yeah, but I would
it's
have to
hard to
be the
say.
person to say whether or not I feel like as a representative of my generation that we've been failed. And I'm saying that it's not a failure, it may be a gap, but I wouldn't say that we've been failed completely. But you can go ahead.
but one
Well,
of the reasons
the
why
whole
one of
thing
the
is basically to
well,
me, if you don't hit
let me
back,
set this up for you, Mr. Scott, because one of the reasons why I started this program is because I believe it was in 2010. I had a high school senior tell me that our generation had failed them and it had not given them the proper tools in order them to know what was happening.
That's
With
12 years a slave, Mr. James. That's 12
hey,
years ago. We have come a long way.
well, but 12 years ago you were much younger also, and I was and
12 years ago, I probably would have agreed that we had been failed at that point. But as
okay,
I've come into
okay,
knowledge and understanding of just life and people, I realized that there is not a failure of something that they didn't even y'all didn't even know.
right.
It wasn't enough information available for it to be a failure. Y'all learning the same way we trying to learn from what y'all was trying to learn back then. Ain't nobody learned it yet. It's the cycle is the
Yes, and
disinformation and misinformation. But I would not say that you failed me today.
no,
But
but
12
but
years ago, I didn't know my grandma was who my grandma was. So yeah, I would have said the same thing.
go ahead, Mr. Scott.
well, all I can say on that, James, is that if we don't hit back, which is what we're not able to do. I mean, I don't. I mean, marching, protesting, the Montgomery bus boycott was one of the things that I saw that, hey, we're not going to ride the bus. We're going to walk. we're gonna ride bikes. We're gonna walk to work, and we brought that thing down to his knees. But now, what can we do now? Can we stop driving? Okay, now let's everybody. We're gonna stop driving for a month. Nobody's gonna drive their cars. Well, that's impossible. I mean, people have to work. The economy rolls. So I don't see me have letting down the youngest generation. I think that the technology, the things that all that we've talked about, it's new. It's new, and we all have to adjust to it. But I'd love to see us be working more together. I'd like to see more up here in the Twin Cities where a young black man gets shot by police. Then there's this huge outpouring, this huge thing. Well, after that's over, my thinking is, well, where do these people go? I mean, here they come again, just like Crump. He couldn't get up here fast enough after these shootings. I mean, he would have walked up here to get up here for these cases. But what happens after that? You know, it's like once the payoff happens, then it goes back to normal. So whose fault is that? I guess I can't. It's certainly not our fault. We're the victims, if anything.
Um, Brother Williams, I don't know, victims and Negroes, you know, turn, once again, we get, well, I don't like to think of myself as a victim. I mean, that's just, you know, it attacks that warrior side of me, like, thinking of myself as a victim. I mean, I, you know, I victimize. I'm not a victim. Come on now. I mean, really? 75 years and now I'm a goddamn victim.
let me say this. I'm gonna go back to a rap group, just a hip hop group, just to give us clarity on that. Not that y'all may not even know this, but it's a group called Ghetto Boys.
Ah,
They had a song called Niggas and Flies. And so y'all go back to that and check out the lyrics in that, Anthony, and then
I
you'll
might be the
you'll see
only
what
one
we're
old
talking
enough
about.
to even know who the Ghetto Boys are, Mister.
You are not the only one. Don't even do that. Don't do that.
You looked it up. You looked it up. I lived it. Come on.
Nuh-uh. I was alive for the Ghetto Boys. The song that come to mind is not one that I think that I should sing on here though.
Hey, hey, we're after dark. You can sing whatever the hell you
Well,
want to sing, and
I'm
it's my
I'm
show.
referring back
We're
to the
good.
album that actually got them on the watch list by the FBI, and it actually goes back to a time to where we had a relationship with a strong relationship with a lot of hip hop artists in Houston as New Black Panther members coming up in Dallas, commuting between Dallas and Houston, building chapters. So to move on, I think when you was talking about the whole aspect of what happened when you started the show, I look at that from the standpoint of the same thing that we deal with all the time as Panthers, and it's called the lumpy proletarian, which basically means the lower class or the downtrodden of our people, which kind of goes back to the reference I made, Dr. Casey, about TikTok, because I'm typically encountering people of a lesser education. I'm always dealing with the street type of people and I'm seeing the vices that they are hanging with. And so I tailor a lot of my education around to what I see causing them to be disruptive in their life. And obviously anything can be utilized for a positive and should be. But the mass majority of the people are hanging things on the negative, which goes into the fact that technology is moving faster than our natural ability to be able to co-adapt with that technology. So it becomes a tool of destruction more so than an easier used tool of destruction than one of enhancement to the average person. Let me just
Jail
say it like
gossip
that.
travel faster than TikTok.
What's that?
Jail gossip travel faster than TikTok.
Yeah, I can attest to that as well. I can attest to that as well. But also going into what we was talking about, to me, it goes into not blaming any specific generation, but getting all of us to recognize that we have to hold ourselves accountable for the situations and the climates in which we live. So I'm always about saying that the family element must include the community as part of its base overstanding of what it means to be a family. In knowing that, then things will continue to be a back and forth, give and take, win a step, lose two, until we incorporate within our family structure community activism, community empowerment, community operations. We have to care about what actually goes on with our next door neighbor, and so on and so forth. We have to get back to that type of togetherness, and then that will, I feel, lead us to more people being involved and active, like how we are on this panel. And so I simply think that what we're dealing with is we're dealing with just the lack of people that are participating to a position to where, statistically speaking, we are able to make the type of waves we can make. This goes right back to the essence core element of what COINTELPRO is about. Prevent the rise of the Black Messiah, prevent the community and the grassroots organizations from being able to connect with the community so that the community can recognize the power in which it has. This is why the Black Panther Party became public enemy number one. It had nothing to do with the weapons. It wasn't until after the weapons got taken away in California and the Panthers started being more active in the children programs and more active in actually resonating and teaching, politicizing the younger generation, that they became the public enemy number one. And they were doing that over food and breakfast programs. So it was the feeding of the children and interaction with the children, and us basically saying that instead of waiting on the government to do things for us, we're going to do for self, and teaching that to the next generation. That created a situation to where they became, and still continues to be, the greatest threat is when you figure out ways to continue that connection with within the various age groups, and we all learn from each other and work together at that level. And so let's keep that in mind as we move forward. When we talk about unifying, when we talk about bringing together, that is what makes the people dangerous. Is anything that brings us to a position of unifying, because when we come together and we unify around a cause, we can affect that cause. That is just really the bottom line. But we need to do that from a position of empowerment versus a position of emotionalization, versus a position of being reactionary. And that's how I want to close.
Bill, you want to wrap up the subject and then give us your final thoughts, and then we'll go to Brother Williams, Brother Scott, and we'll let Dr. Casey close out the program.
I already did my final thoughts. I got
Oh,
class in the morning.
well,
Yeah,
I'm tired.
look here. Well, you and your tattoos, just go ahead on then. So
Oh well, excuse me and my
that's,
tattoos. Then
that's
we out.
right. But okay, uh, uh, Mr. Scott, you want to give us your final thoughts?
Only that I've enjoyed this evening's program, and I like, the message of the unity, the message of us. We're much stronger when we're in unison, and that's just, they know that, but we have to do it among ourselves. I mean, our families, as the gentleman was saying, it's and that's the work that I do with my books of the Black community, to show who we are. We put those out there over the generations. My dad in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and me now. We're telling this is who our community is. And once we see what we can do, what we're all capable of, I think that's some of the things we don't know. We don't know until we really research, open books, open research. The computer is out there now, internet. You can learn as much things as you want now. So I enjoy the dialogue, and I think we have to continue to have that dialogue.
Hey, as always, Mr. Scott, always appreciate you joining the show. Bill,
My
go
pleasure.
ahead and kind of wrap things up here for us and give us your final thoughts. Bill, are you muted? Let's
You
see.
muted.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. That's what the issue was.
Muted.
So on this day, right, on this very day in 1963, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee organized a protest in Selma, Alabama, in support of two things, both African American or Black voting rights, and tell me if this sounds at all familiar to you. That same year, on the 27th of February, a unarmed Black man named Jimmy Lee Jackson had been shot dead by an Alabama state trooper in that same area. 1965. And so they had a march organized, and on the 7th of March, these marchers approached the Edmund Pettus Bridge and found that their way was blocked by the Alabama state troopers, the same ones, of course, who had previously murdered Mr. Jimmy Lee Jackson. When the marchers refused to turn around, the world watched as two TV crews had arrived on the scene, and the protesters were beaten mercilessly and violently, immobilized with tear gas, and these brutal beatings by the Alabama state troopers were broadcast to the world. Over 50 people were hospitalized. Some of them, never fully recovered from their injuries. And there was then a following march on the 21st of that same month, so just 2 weeks essentially later. And by that point, the federal government had gotten involved. Robert Francis Kennedy, the younger brother of the president and the attorney general, had prevailed upon his older brother, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Sorry. No. This is Lyndon Baines Johnson's administration by this point. Sorry. So LBJ sent federal troops, since it was clear that the state troopers were not going to protect anybody. As the old saying about the mayor of Richard M. Daley once said, the police are not there to cause a disorder. The police are there to preserve the disorder. But, truth sometimes slips out. But the federal troops then came down to make sure there was not a second occurrence of what had taken place on March the 7th. And the Voting Rights Act, of course, passed soon thereafter. The first of the Voting Rights Act of the 60s. There was another one updating it later, but the Act of 1965 passed shortly thereafter. And there was a sort of a question or a discussion about if we have failed to pass on certain things in terms of lineage. And I know you're not a big fan of nonviolence, and I wouldn't let somebody just billy club me relentlessly for 15 or 20 minutes and, while I silently prayed and, hummed, and sang spirituals or whatever. That I wouldn't go out like that either. I'm a person that very much believes that, I might let you get one swing in, but if you're going to swing again, I'm going to have to neutralize you. But whatever your beliefs about violence or nonviolence or whatever, it took a tremendous amount of both spiritual and physical courage for those people to put themselves on that bridge. And to not turn around when the already known to be murderous Alabama state troopers were arriving en masse and on either side of them. So they couldn't really have, after a while, it was clear they couldn't have turned around if they wanted to. They were basically surrounded. And they knew that. They knew that at some point that was going to happen. They had, I don't want to say rehearsed, but they'd gone over, they had training, a certain amount of it, saying you were going to be attacked, you're going to be arrested, you're going to be tear gassed. Now, they didn't realize just how long it was going to go on. I think they assumed that there would be, some beating, but that at some point, especially with TV cameras there, the Alabama state troopers realized, oh, this looks bad, we should stop. But no, not so much. I guess they stopped when their arms got tired, is when they eventually stopped. But it was a watershed moment, as people say. It was a watershed moment because a lot of people, white and black, who I think somehow thought that things were exaggerated or it can't be that bad or whatever it is that people thought, realized, it is. Oh, we're living in an apartheid state. Oh, okay, right. This is Johannesburg. Like Johannesburg is here. We don't have to imagine, living in these other places where these quote unquote terrible things happen to those poor people. Those poor people are us and we're in it. So I think it galvanized people. I think it changed people. I think, you couldn't very much sit on the fence anymore. You either were for or against humanity, right? Because that's even if you aren't a great lover of black people, this is a humanity issue, and it was shown to be a humanity issue when this was broadcast to the world. So we still have events, not quite like the Edmund Pettus Bridge, but we still have events that should be galvanizing people and forcing them to make a choice about which side are you on. Because as Brother Williams points out, when you are at war, it should clarify positions. It should you should be able to say to yourself, do I want to be on this side or that side? Because a lot of what's happened in not only our community, but I think just in America as a whole, is people have decided, well, I'd like to tread this middle ground. I don't want to necessarily be. The word militant has gotten like a bad rap or something. Like no one wants to be thought of as militant anymore. Oh, I don't want to sound too militant. Like, why exactly? I mean, like, help me understand. And you can be militant and nonviolent if that's how you want to do it. I mean, Jesus was a militant. Like, people have somehow forgotten who Jesus really was, but that's a whole other show. I guess we kind of touched on it in a show we did a while back. So my final thought is that with the understanding that while things may have de-emphasized from this day, 57 years ago, and while some things may have de-intensified somewhat since this day 57 years ago, the same struggle, the same war, the same casualties of that war are still accruing, right? None of this has ended. None of this has gone away. So the only thing that's changed, I think, is people's understanding of how bad things really are and how serious things are. And so so that's how this fence sitting, and I don't know if I want to get involved in whatever has happened, is because people have not been reminded that this is a life and death issue and people are still being killed. That is my final thought.
So true. Brother Williams, take us home.
Well, I just kind of want to build off of what Bill was saying in regards to this as being a recognition of humanity. When we get exposed and look at any atrocity that's taking place between any two group of people, and we talk about this from a position of warfare, like I was saying, within Ukraine and Russia and the Nazi involvement, the bottom line is humanity is in a place to where it is getting sicker. And the only way things are going to get better is if we all take a step back, recognize how desensitized we have become to our conditions, and recognize that if we as humans, regardless of race, regardless of creed, regardless of ethnic background or whatever, or religious perspective, continue to allow things to go the way they are going, nobody ends up as a winner. We all are going to suffer. We're going to end up annihilating ourselves as a human race. So we owe it to ourselves if we recognize where things are headed by just simply looking at the patterns of what's happening, and realize that enough is enough. I have to do something now, be involved now to make the change for the next generation. Just recognize the fact that if we continue to allow things to go the way they're going, it is the next generation that is going to get the blunt end of it, and the generation behind them may not even exist. So we must come together as a people, and we must heal as a people. Going back to the final aspect of warfare, one of the biggest issues we have with just even being able to identify with the condition that we are at war as a people is the fact that most of us don't know how to recognize where the enemy, who and what the enemy is. We're so filled with self-hate and self-destruction that in essence the enemy has to start from within, taking a real look at ourselves and how we view ourselves. Because if I'm fooled with self-hate, there's no way I can love someone else, truly love someone else, to be able to extend my hand and not engage into warfare and destruction with them. So let's look toward healing each other. Let's look toward figuring out ways to reconnect the family. Like I say, and when I say family, I don't mean your immediate blood. I mean the condition of the community. we have to start healing. And that healing process will take us to a place to where we are ready and capable and willing to accept our place in the fact that things are not the way they should be. And that's why I say, as a Panther, all power to the people.
Well, thank everyone for their participation. Look forward to talking to everyone next week. And I appreciate everyone. All power to the people, Brother Williams.
Take
All
care.
the people.
I'm still a little sad. I somehow missed Dr. Casey's tattoos, apparently, but I am. But it was a pleasure, gentlemen. Once again, I look forward to it.
You have to check out an Instagram or webpage to be able to.
Yeah, your webpage is real nice.
Right.
Mr. Scott brought up that subject this at the beginning of the show. So, but he did use it in a reference as to ordering her books. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to try to imagine how those two things connected, and just leave it at that. I guess we'll just leave because that way there's a beautiful mystery to it.
Have a great night, gentlemen. I'll see you all next Monday.
All right.
Yes. See you next week. Oh boy. Well, I will have to look for that now. So it's on the website. Okay.
Yeah, I sent him.